3I Atlas awakens, the silent trajectory, the ultimate choice. NASA makes the call to obliterate Comet 3IA Atlas. Complete annihilation. This is where it all starts. And I say this as someone who was present in the briefing chamber when those first inconceivable figures flashed across our displays. My name is Michio Kaku, and what I'm going to tell you isn't conjecture, isn't hypothesis, but rather the revelation of a cosmic mandate that pushed humanity toward the most significant scientific decision of our era. The instant the telemetry data arrived, every fiber of my being signaled that this object, designated C/223A3 Atlas, though we in a laboratory called it 32 Atlas, our third verified interstellar visitor, was anomalous. Its trajectory was anomalous. Its speed was anomalous. Its makeup was anomalous. Every aspect of it contradicted the serene equilibrium of our solar neighborhood. And this was prior to the computations that started revealing a scenario no physicist wishes to witness. A collision course. The initial discovery seemed almost routine. Just another dim streak captured by the Veris C. Rubin Observatory during its standard nocturnal scan. Yet when the modeling specialists input the information into the orbital calculator, silence fell across the room. This comet wasn't simply traveling through. It was navigating a gravitational passage from the depths of interstellar territory, gaining velocity in a manner wholly incompatible with any natural long-period comet. 18 months, that represented our time frame, a celestial timer. The initial simulations spread across our monitors like a slowly unfolding catastrophe. Earth sat directly within the zone of probability. The collision pathway cut through significant population centers spanning 3 continents. Even our most optimistic projection, a close pass, spelled disaster with tidal disruptions and atmospheric shock fronts massive enough to throw global climate patterns into chaos for generations. We physicists typically stress probabilities, error margins, degrees of uncertainty. However, in this case, uncertainty became our adversary, and those error margins kept contracting towards certainty. Still, the physical threat wasn't our sole anomaly. Spectrographic readings from pan-stars disclosed something I remain unable to fully rationalize. Concentrated metallic markers, abnormally elevated levels of heavy elements, and an unusual isotope distribution pattern inconsistent with any recognized astrophysical genesis mechanism. Not ancient ice, not rocky silicates, not anything conforming to our existing models. The comet appeared to bear the signatures of an origin that had never operated under our chemical principles. Then the signal arrived. A cyclical narrowband transmission concealed within the background interference. Weak, organized, distinctly non-random. Our initial assumption was sensor malfunction, possibly a heat-related error. Yet as we processed the information, the sequence crystallized. A beat, followed by silence. Then another beat with altered intensity, excessively regular to overlook, overly intentional to ignore. Something was radiating from 3I Atlas, and whether it originated from its structure, its trajectory, or something contained within, we couldn't determine. But we understood it was transmitting something, a communication, a defect, a natural vibration. I won't pretend absolute knowledge. I'll simply state that I've dedicated 4 decades to analyzing cosmic mathematics, and sequences that recur with such accuracy are seldom coincidental. 3I Atlas echoes, the signal that responds. When NASA assembled the crisis meeting, every laboratory, every simulation facility, every organization presented their optimistic and pessimistic forecasts, and every scenario pointed toward one harsh reality. If 3I Atlas continued undisturbed, Earth wouldn't survive. The kinetic force alone, magnified by its unusual density, possessed city-erasing potential. The isotopic volatility threatened ocean vaporization. Even its magnetic properties, yes, magnetic, suggested an internal composition unprecedented in standard cometary science. The discussion shifted away from scientific interest. It became focused on persistence. That's when the president posed the question to NASA explicitly, unambiguously, what is the final decision? And NASA replied, total destruction. Operation Aegis, a nuclear intervention in distant space, a preventive assault on the most mysterious interstellar body humanity had ever encountered. The research community exploded in debate. Diplomats went into crisis mode. Engineers mobilized rapidly. Yet the directive remained firm. However, none of them, not NASA, not government officials, not even the astrophysics panels, understood the element that disturbed me most profoundly. The signal, that weak structured transmission embedded within 3I Atlas, intensifying as it drew closer, a signal that immediately prior to annihilation exposed something even more troubling. When the crisis assembly at the United Nations commenced, the environment was unprecedented in my professional experience. It transcended diplomacy. It transcended tactical planning. It was something visceral, an implicit dread that the universe had presented a test we lacked preparation to meet. Representatives from NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, JAXA, and every principal scientific authority filled a chamber that abruptly seemed inadequate for the gravity of our deliberations. And I remained there understanding the signal within 3I Atlas kept pulsing. Two opposing groups formed almost instantly. The first, spearheaded by multiple European researchers, advocated for a deflection attempt, a controlled redirection, a kinetic strike, a gravitational tugboat. Their reasoning was straightforward. We cannot eliminate the most crucial interstellar specimen ever found. We must safeguard it for investigation. They emphasized preserving understanding, the chance to examine material from beyond our stellar system, the moral obligation to prevent irreversible obliteration. The opposing group, NASA, Pentagon consultants, and various independent physicists, maintained the reverse position. Survival takes priority, investigation comes second. The calculations were too constrained, the schedule too compressed, the mass too volatile. A redirection effort risked fracturing 3I Atlas into numerous smaller pieces, each fragment potentially deadly. One massive collision meant tragedy. A deluge of thousands of molten fragments meant extinction. I observed the discussion intensifying, becoming increasingly charged. Every forecast appeared on presentation monitors. Energy trajectories, breakup likelihoods, gravitational deviation models, dispersed impact possibilities. Yet regardless of how the information was displayed, it led to the identical, sobering verdict. Our tolerance for miscalculation was infinitesimal. 3I Atlas divide, the clash of final choices. Then I disclosed the signal, a narrowband broadcast originating within the comet, consistent across time, gaining definition as 3I Atlas neared the interplanetary region. The chamber went quiet, not in alarm, not in fascination, simply quiet. Because a natural celestial body shouldn't generate a structured frequency. A chunk of primordial matter from a distant star system shouldn't function like a transmitter. I presented the process signal, a measured pulse resembling an encoded pattern. Not verbal, not melodic, not static, something intermediate, something purposeful. And at that instant, the discussion splintered into something considerably more explosive. Some contended the signal warranted preservation. If this represents a communication, they argued, destroying it would constitute humanity's most catastrophic scientific loss. Others maintained it justified destruction even more forcefully. If something within that body is broadcasting, they countered, we cannot permit it near Earth. The impasse solidified. Government leaders conferred privately. Scientists walked restlessly. Consultants retrieved classified materials, and the orbital chronometer kept ticking down toward the unavoidable. Then arrived the decisive moment. Fresh simulations demonstrating that if 3IA Atlas broke apart during a deflection maneuver, Earth would face strikes not in a single location, but across several hemispheres concurrently. No mass evacuation, no protective measures, no rebuilding. NASA rose and delivered the ultimate proposal. Operation Aegis, total destruction, a nuclear strike in remote space before the comet penetrated Mars's gravitational influence. The president approved the proposal, and as the session concluded, I witnessed the representatives departing, some enraged, some petrified, some emotionally drained, while the signal within 3IA Atlas maintained its pulse, consistent, unhurried, almost as though anticipating our verdict. What they remained unaware of was that directly following the summit, the signal transformed. Not in intensity, not in wavelength, but in configuration. It became interactive. 3I Atlas breakpoint, the last 5 minutes. The instant the president greenlit Operation Aegis, everything transitioned from discussion to implementation. The atmosphere within NASA grew rigid. The monitors transformed. The terminology transformed. Time constraints supplanted theories. And despite years of championing science, exploration, and inquiry, I stood in a chamber where the sole permissible result was eradication. The directive was unambiguous. Complete destruction of Comet 3I Atlas, a nuclear interdiction in deep territory. Strategic command units materialized within hours. Technicians unveiled classified blueprints, adapted high-yield devices capable of enduring deep space radiation and executing a targeted explosion near the comet's center. Vandenberg Space Force Base initiated the launch sequences. I observed technicians, engineers, and scientists operating with robotic efficiency, as though feelings had been suppressed to accommodate survival imperatives. But feelings hadn't vanished from everyone. Opposition emerged from the research community nearly immediately. Associates I'd collaborated with for decades confronted me in corridors demanding justifications, charging NASA with perpetrating a transgression against knowledge. Some proclaimed that humanity was annihilating the sole interstellar artifact with the potential to revolutionize our cosmic comprehension. Others murmured their concerns that the signal within 3 Atlas indicated the comet wasn't a comet whatsoever. I couldn't offer them reassurance because the reality was the signal had altered once more. Each time we broadcast a diagnostic probe, the signal modified subtly, rhythmically, like a response adapting to fresh input. Not conscious in our conventional understanding of consciousness, but reactive, as though something within the comet acknowledged our scrutiny. That was the aspect I couldn't articulate openly. Launch day neared, and within mission control the pressure was crushing. Controllers practiced emergency override sequences. Deep space monitoring networks oriented toward the objective. The onboard warhead AI executed stress calculations at accelerated rates. Even the facility's illumination seemed oppressive, reduced, as if the comet's existence thousands of miles distant projected darkness into our space. When the president requested final verification, NASA responded with one word: proceed. And as the projectile advanced toward the platform, the signal within 3 Atlas produced a novel sequence, one we'd never witnessed previously, more rapid, more acute, resembling an alert or a timer. It marked the first instance I questioned whether Operation Aegis wasn't merely a protective operation, but the commencement of something we'd fundamentally misinterpreted. The missile departed Earth without fanfare, without public countdowns, without the spectacle the masses envision regarding space operations. It ascended through the atmosphere like a soundless lance, disappearing into obscurity. And from that point forward, every pulse inside mission control synchronized to its path as it accelerated toward the rendezvous coordinates, an orbital channel between Earth and Mars, so restrictive it resembled threading a celestial eye. I tracked the signal from 3I Atlas continuously. With each kilometer the missile advanced, the signal intensified. What started as a faint rhythm now possessed architecture, variation, nearly a tempo. It wasn't language in any form we recognized, but it responded to our presence. When we altered the missile's tracking beam, the signal adjusted reciprocally. When we modified frequencies, it replied correspondingly. Action and reaction, examination and answer, like a reflection that had abruptly comprehended the distinction between mirroring and volition. 3 days into the operation, complications surfaced. A progressive malfunction in the missile's navigation programming. Unexplained disruption, high-frequency disturbance flooding the internal detectors. Mission Control rushed to identify the source. Solar emissions, negative. Debris impact, negative. The disruption's signature corresponded to the signal emanating from the comet itself. 3I Atlas was actively compromising our technology. We addressed the malfunction manually, but the error resurged more intensely, as if the comet predicted our correction. I watched programming scroll past, malfunctioning in patterns that seemed deliberate. The missile now battled both celestial mechanics and something additional we couldn't identify. Upon reaching the terminal approach interval, the crew prepared to activate the warhead. We possessed 5 minutes to execute manual engagement before the missile exceeded the target zone. 5 minutes to determine Earth's destiny and possibly something greater. The chamber fell deathly silent apart from keyboard clicks. Then the comet released a fresh emission. Acute, ascending resonance. So powerful our instruments overloaded. Displays wavered. Data transmission halted. And momentarily, every terminal in mission control went black. When the systems restored, the missile had veered off trajectory. Manual engagement became our remaining alternative. The timer started. Controllers called out coordinates. The warhead anticipated our authorization. And precisely as we readied to initiate the procedure, the signal from 3I Atlas evolved into something unmistakably systematic. Something resembling structure, recurrence, amplification. It no longer registered as a pulse. It was a communication or an alarm, and we triggered the detonation regardless. 3I Atlas Afterlight, the message within dust. The explosion manifested not as a remote flicker, but as an erupting celestial body, silent, incandescent, hot, radiating against the emptiness like a blossom constructed of pure energy. For one fleeting instant, Mission Control ceased breathing. Every monitor flooded with detector readings, particle measurements, fragmentation data, and then gradually, impossibly, the form of 3 Atlas disintegrated into a tempest of luminous particles. The comet had vanished, atomized. Operation Aegis had accomplished its goal, but accomplishment didn't register as triumph. The moment the warhead ignited, the signal we'd been monitoring for months, steady, measured, interactive, didn't cease. It proliferated not in volume, not in power, but in dispersion. The frequency disseminated through the debris field, subdividing into numerous faint reverberations like fragments of a shattered reflection. For multiple minutes, the particle cloud pulsed with electromagnetic waves, each one carrying a portion of the initial pattern, a terminal echo, a fading exhalation, or something awakening. As the pieces scattered, our detectors registered an unanticipated occurrence. Isotopic markers unlike anything in our records. Elements with radioactive profiles that contradicted established nuclear mechanisms. Particles behaving like charged plasma absent solar wind influence. We observed silently as the remains of 3I Atlas extended into a narrow helix that floated harmlessly toward the outer boundary. But safety wasn't the inquiry. The inquiry was what had we eliminated. Hours afterward, instruments from Hubble, Webb, and terrestrial observatories verified complete neutralization. No intact nucleus, no secondary pieces substantial enough to endanger Earth. Humanity was secure. The media would announce victory. Authorities would discuss cooperation, resolute action, planetary protection. But within NASA, the atmosphere was subdued, waited, because the secrecy directives arrived before sunrise. All spectral information, all analyzed specimens, all signal recordings, classified. Operation Aegis became a restricted document. Even I faced limitations. The authorized account was elementary. An exceptionally dense interstellar comet represented an impact danger, and Earth eliminated it. Nothing beyond, nothing peculiar, nothing unresolved. But I had examined the unprocessed data hours before the lockdown, and I understood what was being concealed. The isotopic irregularities, the electromagnetic interference, the interactive signal. In one terminal sequence captured in the microseconds following detonation. A pulse duplicated thrice, then stillness. Not arbitrary, not interference. A configuration that didn't correspond to the comet's previous transmissions. Something transformed in the moment of annihilation. But the choice had already been executed. Scientific curiosity was no longer pertinent. Solely survival mattered. Weeks elapsed, yet the repercussions persisted. The particle cloud started reacting with the solar wind in unexpected patterns, generating subtle auroral phenomena across several worlds. Jupiter illuminated with novel rings. Mars shimmered with delicate curtains of radiance. Even Earth witnessed brief, inexplicable atmospheric displays, gentle spirals of phosphorescence at latitudes distant from polar regions. Magnificent, benign, and profoundly disturbing. Specialists debated openly regarding plasma physics, charged particle behavior, heliospheric dispersion. But privately, a different inquiry circulated. Did 3IA Atlas transmit its terminal communication before its destruction or as a result of it? I cannot provide that answer. Humanity selected security over exploration, assurance over potential, a managed explosion over an unmanaged confrontation. Perhaps that represented the sole logical option. Perhaps it rescued us from a calamity we could never fathom. Or perhaps in our apprehension, we extinguished something that posed no danger whatsoever. As a physicist, I've devoted my existence to seeking significance in the universe. But this marked the first occasion I sensed the cosmos returning my gaze. And the quietness it abandoned was more deafening than the blast that generated it.